there was a little snail named Turbo. He only watched a car race competition called Indy 500 on TV, and he dreamed of participating in such a race one day. But how would he participate in the race being just a small snail? However, despite being a small snail, he did participate in this car race one day. A story like this was made into the movie Turbo in 2013. So, let's start the story without saying too much. Turbo and his older brother Chet lived in a house together, and in the morning, many other snails joined them to steal tomatoes from the garden of that house. But Turbo was completely different from these snails. His dream was to participate in a huge race one day. So he watched that race on TV daily and imagined himself there. But his older brother didn't like all these useless activities. He always told Turbo to be quiet and to stop dreaming these useless dreams. Hearing the words of a driver named Guy who won the race inspired Turbo. Guy said in his speech, "No dream is too big, and those who dream can never be small." Hearing Guy's words, Turbo started dreaming even more. Then, to practice independently, he went a few inches in 17 minutes, breaking his new record. Due to being a snail, his speed was very slow. Yet, he couldn't give up. Then, in the morning, they all went to the garden of that house to steal tomatoes. They continued stealing ripe tomatoes. While they were stealing tomatoes, that naughty boy from the house came there. Seeing him, the leader of the snails told everyone to hide inside the hole. They all went inside the hole. But Turbo refused to go inside the hole in any way. When his brother Chet told him to go inside the hole, Turbo said to him, "It will never be possible again through that door. I'm not afraid of anyone." With this, he called that boy again. But that naughty boy couldn't find them that day. After finishing eating, they returned home. Then, Turbo continued watching Guy's interview on TV while drinking juice. In his interview, Guy tells the audience that taking a risk will either bring a chance or a safe defeat. Turbo then cries out, "I'll take the risk." Guy continues to say that racers have something that sets them apart from others. But just as he is about to say it, Turbo spills his juice, and that's when the TV turns off. No matter how hard Turbo tries, he can't turn the TV back on. And for that, he cries a lot because he didn't hear what Guy said. Anyway, the next morning, they go back to the garden to eat tomatoes. While they were searching for tomatoes, a very beautiful, ripe tomato fell from above onto the grass. But as soon as they go to pick up that tomato, someone comes with a grass-cutting machine from above to cut the grass. Seeing this, everyone becomes very disappointed and leaves the place. Seeing them leave, Turbo asks, "Would you accept defeat so quickly?" "But I can't accept defeat." With this, he turns back. The machine doesn't start anymore. Then Turbo takes the risk to go get the tomato. At that moment, he tells himself that in every race, there comes a moment when the racer has to decide to throw in the towel. Then, he leaps to get the tomato. Just then, the grass-cutting machine starts. Turbo takes it as part of a race. He sees the tomato as the finish line of the race and the grass-cutting machine and himself as competitors. Then, he starts his race. He has to win this race no matter what. Meanwhile, the grass-cutting machine was getting closer and closer to cutting the grass. It was trying very hard to escape, but its speed was very slow. Meanwhile, the grass-cutting machine was almost reaching the tomato. Turbo sees that a trophy comes out from inside the tomato. But just as he is about to touch the tomato, the grass-cutting machine comes there. Before it could push him away, his brother Chet squirts water on it with a hose and pulls him away from there. Turbo thinks he lost the race. His brother comes there and scolds him a lot, telling him to stop all these useless activities. That night, feeling upset, Turbo goes to a railway station in the city. Sitting down below, he sees an extraordinary scene. Seeing those cars, he starts imagining all of them as race cars. Again, his mind feels better. Then, he sees an airplane flying away. He also wondered if he could fly like that. But then suddenly a huge train comes roaring through the railway line. Being carried away by its wind, Turbo lands on a pipe, and bouncing on it, he lands on top of a car. He thinks to himself, "Wow, I survived this journey." But then the car starts. It was a racing car. Two cars meet here and a race is about to begin. Turbo starts the race with the cars before understanding anything. But when he realizes it's a race, he becomes very happy. Because that's exactly what he wanted. As the car accelerates, Turbo speeds into the engine compartment of the car. Then, the driver injects nitrous oxide into the engine to make the car go even faster. And when the nitrous oxide enters the engine, Turbo is inside the engine. And he sinks into them completely. He also ingests some nitrous oxide himself. But suddenly, he falls out of the car. And then he loses his consciousness. When his consciousness returns, he sees several bugs approaching him, carrying him away, believing him to be dead. He brushes them off and starts heading towards his home. When night falls, he can't figure out where he is. Then suddenly, light begins to emerge from his eyes. He still can't understand anything. As the light fades, suddenly, from behind him, the light starts to flicker like a red traffic signal of a car. What's all this about? He can't understand anything. So, he starts to wander around. After a lot of effort, everything comes to a halt at one point. The next morning, when he was wandering around the garden of that house again, suddenly, music started playing from within him. And just then, the naughty kid from that house came there with his bicycle, and he notices Turbo. The kid tries to push Turbo with his bicycle, but right then, the engine starts from inside Turbo's shell, and he starts moving like a car. A superpower had come inside him. Seeing this, the kid is amazed. He tries to push Turbo again, but despite many efforts, the kid can't catch him. At one point, the kid gets caught in the wheel of the bicycle, and he starts riding the bicycle. Then the kid, scared, runs away from there. Then, as the two brothers are talking in the garden, suddenly, a crow comes and grabs the younger brother by the shirt. Turbo starts using his superpower to help save his brother by speeding towards the crow. As Turbo gets closer, the crow stops in its tracks with the younger brother. But just as the crow tries to snatch his brother, Turbo intervenes and saves him. The crow couldn't grab him anymore. Then, while the two brothers were talking, suddenly, a bulky man named Tito came and grabbed both of them. This man used to show people races with Shamuck at his bread shop and earn money. He takes Turbo and his brother with him to stand next to Shamuck for a race. But when the race starts, all the snails start moving at their own pace, and Turbo stands quietly. Seeing this, the people around start laughing. But suddenly, Turbo spins several laps so fast using his superpower that people are astonished. Then the other snails remaining there become his friends. The man named Tito, who had brought Turbo there this time, planned to show races with Shamuck at their shop and earn a lot of money. After staying there for a few days, Turbo's shop is closed. He tells him, "You will stay with me, and I will show your talent to the whole world. I'll take you to talk shows, show you on TV, and do much more." While they were standing there talking, they found an ad for a race of that supercar named Indy 500. Turbo then tells Tito, "I want to participate in the Indy 500 race." Tito agrees, and then they all set off for Indianapolis, where the race is held. On the way, they have a lot of fun, singing together. And that's how they reach their destination. They enter the stadium and are amazed, because it's such a big place that none of them could have imagined. Turbo is especially happy because he is now in his dream place. Then they see, to their amazement, that they are racing there, singing, and each testing themselves. Turbo, on the other hand, goes to the highest place to watch the race. The cars were racing with such force that everyone was amazed. He drives the car at a speed of 230 kilometers per hour, breaking his record. Upon seeing this, Tito becomes a little doubtful. He thinks whether Turbo will be able to handle such pressure. Nevertheless, after resolving all doubts, he goes to the registrar and deposits his money. Then he says, "I have a driver with me who will participate in this race." However, the registrar asks, "Which team does your driver play for?" But when Tito mentions the name of his shop, the registrar can't recognize anything. Then the registrar asks, "Has your driver passed the test?" Tito takes him aside and says, "Whatever you want, I will provide you. Just register me." But wanting to bribe is considered a crime, so he is expelled from there. Looking this way, his race has come to an end. Journalists have gathered around him to take his interview. When he was giving the interview, Turbo pulled Tito aside. To halt the situation, the registrar arrives there and apologizes. However, at that moment, Tito takes Turbo out of his pocket in front of everyone and declares, "This will be the next Indy 500 champion." Ganaye leans in a bit and examines it closely, saying, "This is a snail." Then the registered person asks, "Your driver is a snail?" Seeing this, the audience present there bursts into laughter. Then, when Tito's brother was scolding Tito for all this, Turbo suddenly started racing from there. He rushes away with all his might. Seeing a snail moving like this, everyone present is amazed. Then, when he stops racing, it is seen that he has raced at 226 kilometers per hour. This is sufficient speed for a race. Then Tito takes Turbo by his hand, and all the reporters leave Ganaye and come towards him. Meanwhile, when Turbo was racing, a little child recorded it and uploaded it online, and it goes viral instantly. Seeing a snail running like this, people are very amazed. All news channels and TV shows were only showing Turbo, and everyone was debating whether a snail should be allowed to participate in a car race. After a few days, the CEO of Indy 500 Racing comes to give his statement. Here he will announce whether they will let Turbo participate in the race. However, the CEO says that they cannot allow a snail to participate in any car race. Consequently, everyone present there starts urging them to let Turbo race. Then suddenly, Ganaye steps forward and starts speaking on behalf of the CEO. He says, "I am also a young and entrepreneurial person like this young snail. My father always told me that no dream is too big." And he shows Turbo, saying, "Those who are determined never remain small, regardless of their size." He further adds that if there are no limits to the speed of Indy 500 racing, then why should there be any limit to showcasing talent? Let the people's desires be fulfilled. With this, he leads an agitation to allow Turbo to race. Eventually, under pressure from everyone, the CEO grants permission for Turbo to participate in the race. Then they all come back and throw a party to celebrate this joyous news. While they were having fun, they were shown on TV. Several journalists were interviewing Turbo. Seeing this, he becomes overwhelmed with happiness and tears up. Later at night, but Turbo, unable to sleep, goes to Ganaye's garage to see everything. There, he looks at all his cars. Seeing all the expensive supercars, he is very amazed. He was wandering around, looking at everything. Then he finds Ganaye's trophies. However, when he was looking at the trophies, Ganaye came there, and he starts talking to Turbo. While talking, at one point, he starts disrespecting Turbo. He says, "How did you think you could race and win with me? I don't understand why you want to participate in this race when I have told you. Because if you participate in this race, then everyone in the world will watch this race. A little snail participating in a supercar race will intrigue people. But when the race ends, everyone will see that Ganaye has emerged victorious. Then I will become known worldwide." Turbo was inspired by Ganaye. But hearing these words from him, Turbo is very surprised. Then Ganaye escorts Turbo out of his garage and says, "Go away, foolish fox, go home." Then the day comes when the race begins. The stadium is packed with people. Besides, today's race will be broadcast in almost 33 languages from nearly 200 countries. All the spectators and people are very excited to see a fox race. Then one by one, all the racers are introduced. Famous racers are quickly identified. At one point, Ganaye enters. And then, in the stadium, all the spectators chant his name as a slogan. And finally, amidst fireworks and cheers, Tito arrives there in a car. And with him is Turbo. Then, all the cars started to begin the race. Tito bids farewell to his friend Turbo and leaves. Then Turbo gets ready for the race. Finally, the race begins. Turbo starts his race along with all the other cars very skillfully. His brother was sitting in the audience watching the race. Although he didn't want to see it at first because he thought his brother would get hurt, he could never accept it. But a little boy forcefully grabs him and sits him down here. Although Turbo started very well, gradually, he began to have a lot of trouble. Under the pressure of so many cars, he starts swerving here and there. At one point, his condition becomes such that it seems he will die right away. Tito and his friends become very disappointed. They keep thinking, what do we do? We led Turbo to the path of death. The spectators keep saying Turbo's story ends here, but Turbo doesn't stop. He continues to push forward with all his might. When it's time for the first pit stop, Turbo slows down. His friends tell him that he's just a snail. What more can he do? His other friend tells him, why are you fighting like a supercar? You're not a supercar, you're a snail. You'll fight differently from them, and you will win. Turbo himself realizes that he needs to race better. Then they take great care of him and send him back to race again. Turbo now races with all his might. However, he couldn't surpass them in any way. At one point, he slips under a car and makes his way forward. Towards the end of the race, he starts overtaking all the cars one by one. He reaches the second place. Before him now is only Ganie. Then, he tries to overtake Ganie. But there were many tire fragments on the road. They come towards him. He gets very scared. But suddenly, a piece hits him, and he gets a tremendous push towards the side gallery. His shell breaks, and he comes to a halt near his friends. Everyone becomes very disappointed. But Turbo is not willing to accept defeat in any way. He starts running again. Seeing Turbo racing again surprises everyone. Turbo keeps leaving everyone behind again. When Turbo was passing under a car, due to friction, his paw suddenly lost its power. Suddenly he stops. But after a lot of effort, he starts working again. When he was trying to pass Ganie, suddenly his car tried to push Turbo aside. But Turbo sticks to the wheels of his car. Then he jumps and comes ahead of everyone today. Then they come to the very end. The final flag is flying ahead. But to be the first in Ganie, they drive the car through the space left by the tire's pieces. He leaves Turbo behind. But suddenly, he gets stuck in the tire pieces, and all the cars come and fall on him. When Turbo was flying ahead, Ganie tried to catch him, and then his hood broke. There was a huge collision between cars, and all the cars come to a stop. Turbo couldn't be found either because all his power was gone. There was only a little road left in front of him, but he couldn't go, so he enters the hood in despair. Then his other Shamak friends come there. His brother tells him to end the race. He says, "Look, I climbed on Cock's back and you do something." And says, "My brother will never lose, and that's your specialty." Hearing all this, Turbo decides to end his race. He tries to move forward, but his speed is very slow. Seeing this, the audience applauds. Meanwhile, Ganie wants to take the broken car and end the race. Turbo becomes very angry seeing Ganie's Turbo, so he tries to hit him with a stick. But before his stick hits, Turbo enters the hood, and he starts moving towards the finish line. He will pass the line almost when Ganie tries to catch him, but he can't catch him. Turbo crosses the final line with his hand and wins the race. Everyone is very happy, and that's where this story ends. Please subscribe to our channel for more movie recap.